Welcome to Veteran Resource Podcast, where you will meet nonprofit organizations focused on improving the lives of veterans and their family members. Here is your host, Jeremy Paris.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 14 of the Veteran Resource Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Paris. Today's guest is Jenny Carr from Courage Beyond. But first, I'm going to read a few more reviews. Robert Malin, or Milan maybe, says, "Great job, Jeremy, for filling this need for our vets. A very good podcast." And Go Pack Go 1234 says, "Great job. I love seeing this great support for veterans. Thank you for doing this show." And Fidel CR says, "What a resource. Jeremy is helping veterans in his own way. His storytelling is captivating, but his mission to help other veterans by introducing them to VSOs is heard in every episode. Keep helping those who served our country. We all know a veteran and should send them to Jeremy's podcast. Enjoy." Thank you all for the comments and the support for the podcast. If you have not reviewed the podcast yourself, head on over to veteranpodcast.com/iTunes and leave a rating and review, and I will be reading it on a future episode. Also, if there is an organization out there that you would like to hear on the podcast, let me know. You can tweet me at twitter.com/ParisJ13, or you can send an email to jeremy@veteranpodcast.com. Okay, Jenny Carr joined Courage Beyond soon after its inception in 2007. In her first role with the organization, she personally interviewed hundreds of veterans, service members, family members, and experts ranging from the Korean War to the present-day conflicts. Currently, she oversees Courage Beyond's online psychoeducational and support groups, in-person support groups, adaptive retreats, and counseling services. Jenny has worked and published with Dr. Edward Taub and Dr. Gitendra Uswati at their Constraint-Induced Therapy Clinic at the University of Alabama at Birmingham to develop real-world measures of physical rehabilitation techniques for both adults and children. She holds a BA in philosophy from Birmingham Southern College and a BS in psychology from UAB. Jenny lives in Nashville, Tennessee with her husband Kevin and their large, lovable dog Bert. All right, let's jump right into the interview. Jenny, welcome to the Veteran Resource Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Outstanding. Okay, Jenny, I wanted to find out more about Courage Beyond. Can you give me a quick overview of what that is?
Sure. So Courage Beyond is a program of Centerstone, and it provides no-cost programs and services to service members, veterans, and their loved ones who are facing invisible wounds of military service. So in that, we have online and in-person support groups. We have face-to-face counseling, a 24/7 crisis line, and then therapeutic retreats that we execute all through our Courage Beyond program.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm dying to get more into that, but first I wanted to find out a little bit more about you, Jenny. Can you give me a little bit more about your background?
Sure. So I am a Nashvilleian. I'm a Nashville, Tennessee native. Have lived there most of my life, except for a brief detour down south into Birmingham for about 10 years. I went to school in Birmingham, and before that in Nashville, I grew up in a home that was a home of PTSD. So I was the child of a mother with PTSD. And so this mission is something that is very close to me. I saw it in my house. I saw my mother go from this vibrant, wonderful woman who was just a rock star in the kitchen and in her law degree and everything that she did. And then one day she shut down when I was about 12 years old and just became this shell of a woman. I remember at the time, and I guess I won't go into it in too much detail right now, but at the time I was really angry with her and really ashamed, and couldn't understand why she wasn't just pulling herself together and being the mom that I knew she could be. And then I also watched my dad wander with her in that misery and shut down himself and give up all the things that he loved. And so when I left, it was really with the purpose of being just far enough away that they couldn't visit me because I was embarrassed of them. I ended up getting my degree in psychology. I wonder why. And I remember the day that my dad called me, and she had been diagnosed with all these things, anxiety disorder. She was also in, it was a panic disorder, anxiety disorder, just this kind of slew of things that they had, psychologists and psychiatrists had diagnosed her with and just medicated her for. But he said, Boo, I think your mom has PTSD. And I remember at the time thinking, well, that's absurd because I am a psychology student and I know PTSD and it's all these different symptoms. And what my mother is not PTSD. And also she's not a veteran.
Right.
Right. So all these things are going in my head. No, you're not right. But then all of a sudden I stopped and I thought about it. And all these scenes in my life all of a sudden got switched from this view of this, preteen to teenage girl who didn't get along with her mother to seeing things from her perspective. And in that instant, I was ashamed because I realized at that point how wrong I had been and how, my family, who has been so loving and supportive in so many ways, was on the verge of collapse because of something we didn't understand. So it was actually at that point that my dad and I started talking about building something to fix that, which is actually what is now Courage Beyond, how that came to be in some ways. So when I talk about it being my life, it is absolutely my life, at least my work life now, but it really does affect me personally. Outside of that, I think I'm probably one of those people that, I don't know, I've found incredible healing outside of, PTSD. I have a great relationship with my mom right now. And I think our relationships together have really allowed us to explore all kinds of healthiness and looking at ways that our whole being can be better within community and by practicing health outside of the medical office. And I guess I'm rambling now, so I'll be quiet.
No, that's really interesting because one of my questions, by the way, that I was going to ask, and I don't need to now, was how you kind of got involved with Courage Beyond. And that really kind of paints the picture of, when you're growing up with this and you think that it's something that it's not, and then you go to school and you find out that everything that you've known your whole life is not what you thought it was. I could see how that would have a tremendous impact on you and make you want to pursue this for a career.
Yeah, and it was both and, the schooling did not independently make me change my mind. And that's what is so shocking to me and so important to me in terms of giving people the opportunity to understand, mental illness, post-traumatic stress, everything that is centered around trauma. Because one of the things that I really hate is when people start listing the symptoms of PTSD, but they don't really talk about what that looks like. So they'll talk about numbing. Well, I didn't know what numbing is, but I can tell you that when my mom stopped being able to respond to my love to her, that's numbing. So I just think that seeing the actual application in your life, taking it outside of the clinical textbooks and really applying it to your home and, having a peer support community to translate that for you is just so helpful.
And Jenny, did you have any military ties growing up?
We did. Have you heard of Joint Andrews Air Force Base?
Yes.
That's my uncle.
Really?
Yeah. So Frank Maxwell Andrews is my great uncle. He's my grandfather's brother. And he was lieutenant general at the time that he was the commander of all the U.S. forces in the European theater of operations during World War II. So we kind of grew up with his legacy, and my family was all as children kind of instructed that if you can't be legendary, don't even bother.
That's quite a shadow.
It is a very big shadow. He changed the game of war. He was one of the first people to ever advocate that, victory would come from above, and people laughed at him. But then, he died, he died in an accident. But I think by the time that he took over, and I think it was 1943, he replaced Eisenhower, people were really coming around to this new way of combat. So yeah.
That's pretty incredible. Quite the story.
I will be clear that it is not mine. I have not served in the military. I am living in the shadow of that greatness.
Well, it sounds like you're doing some amazing things yourself with Courage Beyond. And I think it's a great time right now for us to jump into talking more about the organization. And I was going through the website, I was doing my research, and I saw that you guys have a lot of different online classes, and I wanted to find out more about how that works.
Sure. So our online groups are for anybody. We have them for a wide variety of audiences, everyone from people who need our services to people who want to help provide our services in the case of our mental health professionals. And we offer them online because going back to my mother, she was somebody who would not get help outside of her bed. She wouldn't leave her bed. And so we wanted to make sure that no matter what we did, people would be able to get help from us without having to leave their home. We also wanted to make sure that our online groups were set up in a way that people could participate anonymously, so that if they were active duty military or if they were still facing the stigma of mental illness or PTSD, they could come and get support again without having to disclose anything that could jeopardize their career or their relationships.
Right.
So that's why online. We also offer our online groups as classes and workshops. So we do have this element of support with our online groups, but then we're also trying to provide real education and real information to people who are wondering, why my service member is acting this way, or why I'm feeling this way, why can't I move past something, so we can normalize it and then also give them tools to help them overcome it should they be ready to.
That's great. And I also saw that the healthcare professionals can get classes absolutely free through you guys.
Yes, I am so proud of our mental health classes. We provide face-to-face counseling with another program that we serve, and we really want to make sure that our mental health professionals are prepared to help our clients. So we've been offering them classes on combat trauma in particular, on military culture. We did a class called Improving Our Response to Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence recently that showed mental health professionals the depth of victim blaming that can go into a normal counseling session so that they would not do that. We also talked to them about the unique ways that military sexual trauma can affect female and male veterans so that they can be aware of that in their practice as well. So I was really, really proud of those classes in particular.
That sounds great. And still, I can't believe free for healthcare professionals. Go you. Good job.
Well, I think a lot of times we forget as recipients of services like that, how taxing it can be to be a counselor. I mean, everybody talks about how they want to get a massage, but they never think like, gosh, that massage therapist probably is really tired.
Right.
And it's the same with mental health professionals. So we want to give them a chance to actually even just commune with other counselors. Because if you think about it, a lot of them are working in isolation. We had one mental health professional who wrote in and said that she's been working by herself for 20 years and nobody has ever told her if she's doing the right thing or not because she's alone.
Wow.
And so Courage Beyond was actually able to offer her community and support and rejuvenated her desire to serve. So I think no cost actually ends up winning for us in the end.
That's great. And your support groups, you mentioned those. Can you go in a little bit more detail of how those work?
I will try. It's so easy that it might sound silly.
Okay.
But yeah, they're online. We use WebEx and we use typical kind of social media to collect our clients as they need us. And then the groups are online so that people can type in or they can use their microphone. So whatever level of comfort you have in participating, you're able to do that. And then we also offer recordings of some of our groups so that people who might have an additional shyness or time constraints around coming can still get something out of those groups.
Is this peers helping peers or is it leader-led?
It depends on the format. So our support groups are all peer-to-peer. Then we also have our classes, which are taught by experts in their field. So for our class I was talking about with military sexual trauma, we do have an expert advocate that teaches that class. We've also employed counselors and military experts to come in and talk about their unique expertise when they teach our classes. And then regardless of whoever's leading our class, we do a pretty intensive peer training for those leaders just to make sure that they are safe when they're interacting with our people and that they understand the resources that are available to them so that they can be good peers.
Excellent. Excellent. And I also saw that you guys are running a 24/7 crisis number, a crisis line. And I kind of wanted to find out, if somebody were to call that number, what can they expect with that phone call?
Well, I think I want to back up a bit because I kind of hate the name, the crisis line. It's our crisis and counseling line. And I think that the distinction is an important one for a couple different reasons. And you're not wrong. I'm just talking about my own holes in terms of our web presence. But I think it's really hard because so many people, especially if you're in the military, a crisis is when somebody is holding a gun at you and you don't have your weapon with you, Like a crisis is somebody bleeding out and dying. And I think it's really hard to recognize crisis from a mental health perspective if you're not actively suicidal. And so many people that I see that eventually come to us through our other channels that never call the crisis line don't realize that they could benefit from it. So the crisis and counseling line is actually a opportunity for anyone 24/7 to either de-escalate from a crisis if they are in that space, but it's also an opportunity for them to talk with somebody who is a master's level social worker or above about the issues that they're facing and start to kind of troubleshoot what might be best for them. So I think it's really important for those people out there that are maybe going through the day-to-day and feel that emptiness or start to feel like nothing's getting better. Or they start to feel like they want help, but then they feel guilty for asking for help. Like that is who we really want our crisis line to be a help to.
I see.
Yeah. But so when somebody calls our crisis line, they will be connected with a master's level clinician. That person is trained in military culture so that they understand military culture. But we've found that the people that are calling us are calling for a wide variety of reasons. So just because somebody is in the military doesn't mean that they don't need specialized help for a prior trauma or a separate issue. So the counselor will talk to them and talk to them about why they're calling that day, and then ascertain if they have been in the military or if they're a loved one of someone who's been in the military. Because we also see, in addition to dependents, we'll see girlfriends, boyfriends, children, parents. So we see anybody that's affected by that military service. So we ask a few questions just to verify that they're connected to the military in some way. And then once that's done, the phone call is done. From there, that call gets handed off to one of our peer specialists who actually researches the perfect counselor, if that's the route that they're going, who researches the perfect counselor for them. So they'll also find somebody within a 30-mile radius. They'll make sure that that therapist is available for them when their schedule allows. And then they'll make that initial connection and call the client back and let them know those options. And then after that, we actually pass the relationship between the client directly to the therapist, unless they want to change therapists for whatever reason. And that's to protect the privacy of our clients, really, and keep our hands out of their individual cases needed.
Okay, Jenny, I wanted to talk a little bit about PTSD. It seems to be in the news all the time. I think that not everybody has the same idea of what it actually is. Let's say that I was a soldier and I'm thinking I might have PTSD, but I'm not really sure. Is there any way that I could self-diagnose or get some hints as far as whether or not I might have it?
There are. I think PTSD has been in the news a lot just because 1 out of 5 people in the nation are going to be traumatized at some point in their life. And chances are, if you've been in the military, you have more opportunities to experience that trauma. So regardless of whether you have PTSD or just combat trauma or experiencing combat stress, there's definitely signs that you can look for. And then it's really just a matter of you determining yourself if it's something that you feel like needs attention and that isn't going away. Somebody once talked to me about PTSD as being what happens to your brain when it realizes that the very worst that could happen does happen, and then does everything in its power so that it'll never happen again. And if you think about it that way, you experience an event that is life-threatening. And then after that, your body is trying to keep you alive. And so everybody trying to tell you specifically, say, this is over, it won't happen again. Well, the body remembers that it did happen. So if you find your body reacting to those sorts of things, to triggers, that's a sign that you've been traumatized. If you're having trouble sleeping, if you're having actual flashbacks of the event, or just intrusive thoughts about the event, those are all signs that you could have PTSD. And what I think is difficult about that is that the symptoms of PTSD as they're laid out, they can be a little bit undercover. So you may not know you're being triggered, but all of a sudden you feel less comfortable than where you were before. And maybe what's happening is that there's a smell that you're smelling that was the same smell that you smelled over in Iraq. And unless you're documenting that, you may never catch that that's the smell, or that's the color, or that's the word that somebody else used that changed everything in your life, because your body will start capturing what's happening in a traumatic situation, very much in that touch, taste, sight, smell, sound. So, one of the things we talk about is like one of the actual ways you can tell if somebody is traumatized is if they can't tell you what happened.
Wow.
So in a trauma situation, maybe you only remember, like I said, specific words that the person said, or maybe all of a sudden you can talk about the events leading up to an IED explosion. But then once that explosion happens, you'll hear people shift from this narrative to, and then I saw red, and then I tasted blood, and then this happened. And it's all kind of disjointed. That's trauma. And that's trauma coming out of that person's mouth. And so if you're having those memory loss gaps, that's a big sign that you've got PTSD.
Gotcha. And what about symptoms that other people might notice? Let's say that you have somebody at work who you think might have PTSD. Are there ways that you could, or different symptoms that you would notice?
Yeah. There's a couple of big ones. I think anger management, their inability to make decisions between a stimulus and reacting, that's a big one. If you notice that they space out a lot, you're asking them a question and they get that far away look in their eyes, the 1,000-yard stare that people talk about, that is totally real. You can look for that. You can see if that's a sign. There's other things. You might see that they always walk with their back up against the wall, which is fascinating. My mother would patrol the perimeter when she was active in her PTSD, and I never understood it. But again, she learned that the world was unsafe, and so she was going to protect herself. And when I saw Vietnam vets doing the same thing when they were triggered, when I was working at UAB, I started thinking about it, and I thought, wow, this is PTSD. This isn't even combat PTSD. This is what people do when they've been threatened. So back up against the wall, that's so that they can see everything. They can't be surprised. You'll see them not like crowded situations, because that's an opportunity where they're in an environment they can't control, and control is a big thing. Let's see, what else? A lot of times if they're having sleep disorders because they're having intrusive nightmares, you'll see them drinking a lot of caffeine drinks, which I think is kind of in the military culture anyway. So that's not always for certain that's
right.
PTSD and not just, a guy that just really likes his rock star.
Guilty. I drink coffee all day long and all night long.
Yo. It's a big issue in the military in general. But I think at the end of the day, I can give all these advice and, all these symptoms that you can look out for. But I think being respectful of the person that you think might have PTSD, and if you're in an open situation where you can ask them what they want or what they're feeling or what they're going through, and offering them, unconditional support for whatever they're going through, I think that's really what it's all about. I mean, you don't have to be an expert in PTSD to be a human being.
Right. And so I think you answered my question again. I was going to ask what you would suggest for somebody if they come across a friend or a coworker that has PTSD, how they can help. And I think you answered it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that they've got this magic phrase that's floating out in the universe that helps them when somebody dies or when they're in an uncomfortable situation or they want to help somebody with PTSD. But I found it's more about listening than it is about saying anything.
Great answer. I was also looking on the website and I saw that you guys had retreats. Can you tell me a little bit about the retreats that you guys have?
I can. We host about 4 retreats a year at this time. And I think there's a lot of organizations out there that do fantastic retreats. And what we are known for is not only having these fantastic retreats, but also creating a community before and after that retreat experience. So one of the things that's very important to us as Courage Beyond is that if we give somebody help, it's not just about that one church camp high of, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and then dumping them back into the same situation that they were in before. And so once people have been to our retreats, they join a larger community of retreat alumni and are able to continue learning the types of lessons and doing the types of activities that we did at the retreat, actually within their own home in a virtual experience with hundreds of other people.
Oh, that's great.
So we're also really into holistic healing. It was something that, again, I found tremendous help with in my own personal life and really saw it work with my mom. And so we employ every single thing that we can do at our retreat to touch that mind, to touch that body, and to touch that spirit. We focus on feeding people incredibly well, and not just well in terms of health, but also in terms of tasting good. Really make sure that people are able to feed their bodies and their souls. And that means dessert. And it also means vitamins and nutrients with vegetables and fruit and high quality meats. So we do that. And then really it's just about, I think the retreats are really a way for us to show the wide variety of options for getting better and exploring what you like about life, I guess. So, we have people paint, and that's something that some people haven't done since they were 10. We have them hike so they can have their bodies move and experience nature, which I feel like is tremendously important in the healing process. We give them journals that are actually made from a military spouse whose master's project was in turning old soldier BDUs into paper and then into journals where she then captured their story.
Excellent.
So every retreat that we have, she provides journals for our community. And there's just tons of little stuff that we'll do like that with our retreats that I think that makes them special.
Very cool. Can you also tell me a little bit about Her War, Her Voice?
Yes. Her War, Her Voice is our program partner, one of our dearest program partners. And it was started by 2 military spouses that were living in Fort Campbell at the time, who were military spouses. And so they were spending their whole lives seemingly in the shadow of someone else. They were grappling with this kind of duality of voluntarily choosing to follow the person that they loved more than anything, and then living with those consequences of, having to have a career that was mobile or no career at all, having to uproot from families, friends. And so Her War, Her Voice was started just as a blog that allowed them the opportunity to express themselves without judgment, without fear of what they were saying affecting their husband's career. So it was a movement. And since then, they've been partnering with us on our retreats. They've started doing in-person support groups. They have one at Fort Riley and Fort Stewart right now. And then their blogs are incredible. If you go to herwarhervoice.com, you can read all of them.
Very cool. Very cool. Before we get into the final 3 questions, I wanted to see if you can give me some of the success stories from Courage Beyond. I always love hearing success stories.
So you told me you'd be asking me about this, and I have so many. I think the ones that really struck out at me are, in our retreats, our community is so strong. And when I say strong, I mean that if one of our military spouses, she had an EFMP appointment with her kids and didn't have a way to get there. And another military spouse who didn't even know her drove 400 miles to be with her.
Wow.
Based solely on the understanding that they had been through this shared experience and trusted our retreats and what we did for each other. So that wasn't us, but I felt like there's just no greater testament to what we do than that kind of trust. I had another soldier who called me and he wanted to seek counseling because he was facing some pretty bad addiction. And the turning point came for him when he said that he couldn't contemplate a tomorrow, and then he didn't feel like his wife didn't deserve to have to put up with him because he was so broken. And so he wanted to kill himself so that she wouldn't have to bear supporting him anymore. We were able to get him counseling. We were also able to get his wife counseling because wouldn't she know she needed help too. And then we were also able to get counseling for their little 6-year-old boy. And they're still together and they're doing really, really well. And I hear from time to time.
That's excellent.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have so many stories of people that have just come out of the woodwork and said, thank you for the counseling that we've provided, or, what a therapist has done for them. I also hear stories that are, on the other hand, really tragic, which I don't know if it's, I don't know if that's appropriate to talk about the tragedy of it, but I had one woman that called me and is that okay if I tell a story?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think a lot of the work that we do is incredible. And sometimes it really depends on people telling others about what we do, which is why I'm so grateful to be here today. And about a year ago, I got a call or an email from a military spouse whose husband was a Vietnam vet. And they'd been married for decades. And he went to his shed and shot himself because he couldn't bear to live with Vietnam anymore. And a week prior to that, the VA had stopped seeing his support group. They had shut his support group down.
Oh, wow.
And said that, you no longer need our services. And the day that I found that email, I looked at the closest counselor to him that we could have sent him to, and help was 8 miles away, and he didn't know about it.
That's horrible.
Yeah. So I think there's tons of success stories and, but there's just so many more that aren't success stories that we desperately want to be able to reach out and help.
Yeah. Jenny, before we get into the final 3 questions, one last thing that I kind of wanted to go through was for the listener out there, let's say that they're not going in through the crisis and counseling line.
Thank you.
But but let's say that they are having some difficulties. They might have, noticed some of the symptoms of PTSD, or maybe they're just not feeling right about everything. So they come to your organization. Can you kind of walk through, I guess, the best way to navigate their way in and what they would do?
Yeah. If a person is looking to seek services from us, maybe they're experiencing issues that they don't feel are something that they want to give to a counselor, but they want to be around other people that know what they're going through. If you go to our website under services, we actually have a great list of everything that we're doing currently. But then even better than that, we have contact information for all of our program managers, and for our peers. And so if you want to contact us at any time, the info@couragebeyond.org email actually funnels directly into our inboxes, and it is secure. And then from there, we'll start engaging you just to see what is going on, what you need to say, what kind of issues that you're dealing with. And then from there, we will funnel you into groups that we feel like you might get something out of. So maybe we'll send you to one of our mindfulness and meditation classes. Maybe we'll send you to a female veteran support group. So really, we try and give you a very personalized experience of what we feel like would be best. And then we're also incredibly well connected, I feel like, with other organizations across the country. And so we're going to make sure that no matter what, we're taking care of you, not just from a mental health perspective, but from anything else that you might need too.
Excellent. Excellent. And I actually was contacted or was referred to your organization by Code of Support, Jamie, during her interview. So that's a great example of a partner organization that you guys work with regularly.
Very much so.
Okay, Jenny, I think we're ready for the final 3 questions.
Great.
Question number 1. Who would you like to hear on a future episode of Veteran Resource Podcast?
I would love to hear from Ken Falk at Boulder Crest Retreat. Are you familiar with them?
I am not.
Oh my. Hold on to your hat. So he is the chairperson and founder of Boulder Crest Retreat, which is, I believe, 40 acres of a retreat space that he built on his own property in Virginia, Bluemont, Virginia.
Ooh.
And the whole space was built so that people who are coming from Walter Reed, family members and the actual injured soldiers, could go to a cabin and rest and recover. And since they built this, they have added on I think it was like $1 million garden.
Wow.
That they're planting so they can do farm to table. They've got archery. They've got horses. They are right up against the Appalachian Trail. So you can actually walk this historical trail. It's a gorgeous space. And I think more than just the space itself, you've got to talk to Ken. He's one of the most genuine people that I have ever met. He's the kind of person that if you meet him, you automatically think you're best friends. And then you go away and you realize, no, wait, I just met this guy. He's a retired EOD tech. So he's also tough as nails because you don't retire from that,
Right.
that business. So just a fascinating person to talk to, tremendous heart. He's donated so much money to veterans in their community, and his staff is wonderful. So I'd love for you to talk to him.
Well, that sounds really amazing. I might have to go and do that interview in person.
I think you should. He's in your area, right?
Yeah, it's only a few hours away. I mean, I drive down to Shenandoah all the time to go hiking.
I would recommend it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, we are going to go on to question number 2. What upcoming project has you fired up right now?
Well, I've got several. I think the one that I'm most excited about, because it's right on the corner, is our retreat that we're giving for caregiver spouses. We are taking them to my family's home, actually, in Beersheba Springs in the mountains. And I am so excited to get on the Ocoee River and just kind of let our hair down and be together with that. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also pretty excited that our trauma expert for military sexual trauma and domestic violence is going to be presenting next month to a group of Tennesseans who are learning how to be better advocates for survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. So I'm really excited to be able to do that work with her.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, final question, and this one is the brain stretcher, I'll warn you.
Mm-hmm.
If you woke up tomorrow and you found out that somebody made an anonymous donation of $10 million to your organization, what would you do with it?
I think after I finished crying with joy, I would break ground. We've, like I said, I've been doing these retreats, and we've been doing them out of the kindness and goodwill of these incredible people that own their own sites and own retreat spaces. But as someone who believes so strongly that healing happens wherever you find it, I want to build a space where we can have that thought actually practiced. So I want to build a retreat site that's also our offices, that also has horses, where we can garden, where we can feed people physically and spiritually and emotionally. I want to be able to hold conferences there where we can show what we're doing and where other people can show what they're doing so that it becomes a community conversation. And so we're actually collaborating to create a solution around mental health and wellness for veterans and their families.
Wow, that sounds outstanding. And so for the listener out there with the $10 million that's looking for a great place to put it, you just heard what Jenny will do with it. So for that person or for anybody else that's trying to get in contact with you or for your organization, how do they do that?
You can email me, Jenny, JENNY.Carr, CARR, at couragebeyond.org.
Outstanding. I will make sure that I put that link as well as all of the other links that you mentioned in the show notes for this podcast so everybody can find it nice and easily.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Jenny, for being on this podcast. This has been really great, and I found out so much about your organization.
Good. I am always happy to share.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to episode 14 of the Veteran Resource Podcast. Jenny's very passionate about helping veterans through her organization, Courage Beyond. And if you wanted to get in contact with Jenny or find out more about the organization, make sure you hit up the show notes at veteranpodcast.com/014. And I will have all of the information, all of the links that were mentioned during the podcast for you there. Make it nice and easy for you. The music that you're hearing right now, and also it played in the intro earlier, is from Javier and the Innocent Sons. If you want to hear the whole song without me talking over it, make sure you check out last week's episode, which was 013, where I talk about it and I also play the whole song at the end, so you can hear it there. The song is Wartime. Also, in the show notes for last week, you will also find out how to get in contact with Javier and also how to get the music. So that would be veteranpodcast.com/013. Thank you, and I will see you in episode 15.
Should. He told my mom everything gonna be alright.